Sure, sure. We can share the questions. How's that?
Oh, boy. That's okay. You can answer them.
We'll double team you here if that's all right. Or triple team you, Rick, if you want to chime in. Are we ready? Are we rolling?
Yeah, like,
Did you have questions, or did you want us to?
We always have questions.
Okay. Is that what you wanted to do, or did you want us to make a statement first?
Yeah, why don't you go do a statement and we'll follow up questions.
Stacy?
you go ahead. You already had your statement today. So this one right here? Yeah, you go right
Okay. Basically, what we said today, and we'll repeat now, is that we were asked to handle this case by the Attorney General's office. We presented 18 witnesses over 2 days, all the relevant audio and videotape we could find, let the grand jury ask whatever questions they wanted to ask. At the end of it all, we gave them the law, we gave them possible charges. They voted on it and found that the shooting by the officer was justified. The key to the case, I believe, was this 911 call, and a number of people told us that they did not see the significance of that and why the grand jury should even hear that. And to me, without the 911 call, this would have never happened. We've got a caller who, I think for the most part, saw what he said on the 911 call. Some of the things he said on the 911 call, maybe he was trying to fill in some gaps in what he saw, but he very clearly tells the 911 operator, I'm in a Walmart, there's a guy in here with an assault rifle, he's loading it and he's pointing it at people. And this is what is communicated to the police officers. The one officer even calls back in and he's basically, wait a minute, are you saying he's actually pointing it at people? And they say yes. And the law is real clear. When you're a police officer responding to the scene, it's not what is true or not true, it's what you reasonably believe to be true. And there's no reason for these officers not to believe that's what's going on. In fact, if you look at some of the other video in the case, you can tell how tense these officers are. They go to their cars, they take not regular pistols, but assault rifles out of their own cars. They vest up. They're running into the store. As they're running into the store, they're telling people, take cover, find a place to hide. It's obvious that they believe what they've heard is true. Also, these officers are taught, rather than to do what we did in the past as officers, which is kind of go in cautiously and wait to see what develops, they're told you've got to get there as quick as possible because just 1 minute's delay could mean 4 more dead people. So they're told you got to be aggressive, you got to be quick, you got to neutralize the threat. And it's very easy to sit back weeks or months later and say, well, why didn't they do this or why didn't they do that? These officers are doing, and the way I put it, anybody in that store that would have heard that 911 broadcast would have been getting out of there as quick as they could, yet we expect police officers not only to not run away from situations like that, but to run towards it. And that's exactly what these officers do. They find a person who meets the description, who is carrying what is an identical rifle to an assault rifle. They tell him to drop it twice. And again, this victim in this case did nothing wrong. He did not break any law. I don't know why he picked up this rifle. I don't know why he walked around the store with it. And I don't know why he didn't initially comply with the officer's commands, although I think there's a good chance he'd been on the phone so long, by the time he's getting these commands, I don't even know if he realized he still had this rifle in his hand. As he starts to turn towards the officers, and again, he's basically sideways to the officers when he's given that command. They give it twice, and he starts to crouch and turn just a little bit. That's when the shot is fired. As it turns out, it wasn't a toy gun, but it was a pellet gun. It was not a deadly weapon. And again, it's just the best way to describe this, it's just a horrible set of circumstances that if any one of them wasn't present, this would not have happened. Had this BB gun not been in a box like it should have been, but laying open, this would not have happened. Had Mr. Crawford just walked by that BB gun instead of picking up, this would not have happened. Had he not carried it around the store like he did, this would not have happened. Had this person, you know, of all the people that were in that store, only one person made a call, and it was a person that had some Marine experience. He also had a lot of firearms himself. He's the one that actually noticed it as a potentially dangerous weapon. If he was not there, this probably would not have happened. And had the victim in this case not been on the phone when the police officer is talking to him, this probably would not have happened. If any one of those circumstances wasn't there, this probably would not have happened. But they all were. They all converged at the same moment. And it's a tragedy. That's the best way to describe it. You know, every time somebody is killed, it doesn't mean a crime is committed. I had a case almost a year ago to the day that happened locally. It happened in a convenience store, where a clerk is working in the store. A guy totally unarmed comes into the store, starts to walk behind the counter. It's actually someone that the store clerk knew, but the person walking in was playing a prank on him. The store clerk pulls out his gun, fires one shot, and kills him. This person was totally unarmed. We presented that to this grand jury in Hamilton County, and they did the same thing in that case that the Greene County grand jury did. They found it was a justified shooting. Even though the store clerk was mistaken, the grand jury here found that based on all those circumstances, they can see how he was reasonably in fear of his life. And that's exactly what the grand jury in Greene County did in this case.
Hey, Mark, in that 911 call, did it state on there, because I'm trying to listen in my mind to it last night, was he pointing, he was on the phone, he was pointing at people, or he was waving it in the air?
He says both. He says he's waving it around. And what's happening is they tell him to stay on the line as they're putting out the broadcast. Yes, and then they're trying to get more information from him. I mean, they're doing their job. So this guy is trying to give him more information. And he's like, well, he's pointing it at people. At one point he says, I think it was he pointed at two kids?
It's kids, and it looks like he's loading it.
And he looks like he's loading it. We looked at the weapon. Again, it looks just like an assault rifle. It's got a clip, a magazine that goes in and out of it, and when you take it in and out, it makes a clicking sound. This person, when Stacy and I interviewed him, we said, what was it that made you think he was loading it? And he said, well, his back was to me, but I could hear this clicking sound, and it's the same sound you would hear if you're putting individual bullets or cartridges into a magazine. So probably what this person was doing was just playing with this. He was probably taking the magazine out and re-engaging it, making this clicking sound. Again, the 911 caller, trying to be helpful, I think, is saying, well, I think he's loading it.
Well, did he buy it? Was he buying it at Walmart?
No. I don't know I don't know why. The only way you can buy a BB gun at Walmart is to buy it in the box. If it's out of the box like this one is, they will put it in a box before you can buy it. If it's a real rifle, in the display case, not only will they not let you take it out of the store without being in a box, they actually walk it out to the car for you. So they've got some safeguards in place. In this case, somebody else earlier had opened up that box, apparently taken the rifle out, looked at it, set it back down, and Mr. Crawford, really without pausing, walks down this aisle, looks over, sees it, picks it up, puts it over his shoulder, and then walks all around the store with it, and eventually ends up in one of the corners of the store. And at that point, you can see him from time to time waving it at his side, and then he's standing there for a long time with it out like this. It looks like he's moving things around on the shelf with it. And this entire time, the 911 caller, who's probably about 100 feet away, is describing what he's seen. At some point, some kids do walk by. It doesn't appear he's pointing it at them. But again, the 911 caller says it looks like he's pointing it at children. So this is all being broadcast to the officers. In fact, one time the officers even, are you sure he's pointing it at people? And they say, yeah, that's what he says. He's pointing it at people. So that's what's in their mind as they're going in there. They turn a corner. They see the person that fits this description. Put it down, put the gun down twice. He starts to turn. The officer fires a shot. If the officer had waited 5 more seconds, probably Mr. Crawford would have seen what's going on, put his hands up, nothing would have happened. At the same time, if Mr. Crawford did have an assault rifle, it did want to kill people, and turned, and the officers didn't fire, they and countless others probably would have been killed. So that's the kind of judgment call officers have to make in a split second, and that's why the law is pretty clear. The officer he can't be perfect, no one is. He has to have a reasonable fear for his safety. And as long as all this putting together, if a person would say, if I'm that police officer and I'm in that situation, did he have a valid reason to be fearful for his or someone else's life? He's justified in using deadly force. And that's what this grand jury found.
How do you see this playing out with the DOJ involved now?
I told Stacy she's got to take every other one.
Oh boy, I don't know. We're going to have everything's going to be turned over to them, so they can look at the whole everything. I know they have different standards and different things that they go by, so I know they're going to get everything that we had and have an opportunity to look at it and make a decision.
And I know Mr. Pipemeyer said this is just a horrible tragedy.
Pete Meyer, you should know.
And don't let me out much.
This is the second question. No.
But
Ms. Perry?
pardon me?
I'm sorry. Calling you Kimball Perry now.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Anyways, but the 911 caller, I know it has nothing now to do with this case, but I mean his overall feeling about how this happened, and what has he told you guys?
We didn't really talk to him about that, about how his feelings are about it now. I'm not sure. So we didn't really ask him that, did we? Or did we talk to him about it? I was like, did we?
He's getting a lot of grief for this. I mean, he thinks he did the right thing. I mean, I don't, people asked us, can he be charged? I mean, if there was any indication that he made this, I mean, if we found out that he wasn't even in the store, he's sitting at home and he just, hey, this would be funny to call this in. But unless someone could show that he intentionally made this whole thing up. And again, there's some things he says that I think he's just trying to be helpful and fill in the gaps, but there's no question Mr. Crawford had the gun, was walking around the store with it, was raising it up and down. At some point, it's clear he has both hands on the gun, and I can see where a clicking sound could be made. So we didn't really ask him, geez, don't you feel bad? I mean, we didn't really want to put him through that, but at the same time, I think he thinks he did what he should have done.
Was he there today, Mark?
Today?
That witness?
No.
The 911 call?
No, I mean, we had 18 different people testify before the grand jury. We let the parents of Mr. Crawford testify, and Stacy did a great job with them, with just basically, even though it's really not something we normally do at a grand jury hearing, but, let them know what kind of a kid your son was and what was he like, and just try to, and the grand jury made a point of telling us afterwards, and this is outside a grand jury, so I'm not violating anything, that they were really surprised and impressed at how fair and balanced they thought this presentation was. They did not feel that anybody was trying to twist their arm to indict somebody or to not indict someone, and they felt the same way about the investigation done by BCI, which I think we both felt is the greatest compliment you could give us. I mean, we don't care if we're horrible attorneys or this or that, but to me to say we think you were very fair in this is probably the greatest thing we could have heard.
Before that, though, the family was already out there. They were very vocal, saying as soon as you see the surveillance tape, you're going to know that he was innocent. It was a bad cop kind of thing. It was a white-black thing. Did you get any feel for that, and what kind of pressure was on you because of that?
A lot. I mean, there was really a lot. The family made it clear that they would be disappointed at anything less than an indictment. And but again, we said, look, we're going to do our job. We're going to be fair. That's all we can promise you. We can't promise you an outcome or a result or anything else, but if it's there, and we've indicted police officers before, we've tried police officers before. And there's bad police officers out there. The vast majority are good, and there's nothing to indicate to us anything different, that these are good cops put in a very tense, bad situation. In fact, the officer did the firing. He was working, I think, a 12 to 12 shift? 11-11. He'd been writing traffic tickets all day. That was his duty that day. He pulled behind the Walmart to fill out a ticket for some poor schmuck, and he gets this call, man with a gun in Walmart, and he's thinking at first, it might be one of these open carry people out there making a point, or maybe bought a gun and forgot to put it in the bag. So he's saying, well, I'm on site. What else do you got? And then they're saying, well, actually, he's walking around pointing it at people, and he's, anything else? Yeah, he's loading it. And he's like, I mean, again, you could see how serious this was, because he gets out of his car, puts his regular service piece in the trunk, gets out an assault rifle. The other officer shows up, does the same thing, puts on his tactical vest, gets his assault rifle. So it's very obvious from what they did, they thought this was the real deal. And then they're beating feet in there. They're not just walking around. You can see as they're coming in. I mean, it looks like a combat picture. And that's what these guys were taught, that's how they're taught to approach this kind of thing.
When they didn't indict today and you walked outside, did you think there might be protests and stuff going on outside?
Yes, they had the SWAT team there for us. I mean, that's how concerned they were. And actually, there was a group of people that came in and sat in the front row. I had T-shirts on. They were very polite, respectful, did not cause a scene. And I can see where there's concern and people are looking at it. And again, all we can do is try to produce what is a fair result. And it's the only way you can do it. And again, there was big criticism about not putting this tape out up front. And we talked about it a lot. And if that's out up front and everybody's looking at it and dissecting it, as people will do now, the grand jury's going to hear that. And I don't know if we could have gotten a fair jury, because someone would have already told each one of them, I think this or I think that. And again, we got a lot of grief for that, but we agreed with the Attorney General's decision 100%. And the grand jury made a point of telling us, we are really glad we got to see all this and hear all this before hearing from anybody else, because we really thought we could make a decision just based on what we're seeing and not on what an editorial says or talk radio or anybody else says. So again, we think it was fairly presented. We thought the grand jury was very attentive. They asked a lot of questions. In fact, there's some questions we weren't going to ask, and they asked. But again, we let them ask whatever they want, and they came up with their result.
As a point of clarity, are you then, for all intents and purposes, done with this case unless you get called by DOJ for some reason, or?
Good luck finding us. Seriously, no, we are done. This was a very difficult, unpleasant thing to deal with. We're done.
Would it also be safe to say that you feel confident in the grand jury's decision not to indict?
Yes. I mean, based on everything they had, I mean, all I can say is they were very attentive. They asked very good questions, and they reached their decision. I mean, if they would have come back with an indictment, I could understand that, and we'd be pursuing the charges. I mean, again, had this case happened down here, I mean, some counties present every police shooting to a grand jury. We don't, because if it's an obvious, clear-cut self-defense, we just don't do that in Hamilton County. But this is one that even had it occurred here, I think it would have been appropriate to present to a grand jury and let them make the decision. Because he was unarmed and he wasn't doing anything wrong. Police officers did not know either one of those facts.
You've had a lot of experience with this kind of case in Hamilton County. Did that help you at all, or is each one?
Each one's different. Most of ours aren't like this, though. Most of ours is, Rick and I handle these now. I was called out on one last week where it's a lady calls, saying my husband's shooting up the place and threatening me, and they get there, and he walks out, and he's got the gun at his head, and they say, put it down, and then he points it right at him. Those are easy. I mean, and most of ours are similar to that. This one was not easy. This was not, that's why we had 18 different witnesses and hours of video and audio tape, and it was tough.
Is there anything to learn from it here in Hamilton County? Any lessons, whether it's for police in Cincinnati or at the prosecutor level?
Officer was talking to me later today, and, this training, one of the things we thought was appropriate is, how are these officers taught to deal with a situation like this? If you get a call that we got a guy in a store with a gun, well, less than 2 weeks before this, they had a day-long training on how to deal with these situations. And it almost struck me as like a pregame pep talk. It's like you got to get in there and take some names and kick some ass. And I mean, it's like, that's basically would you agree? That's kind of the tone of it. I'm thinking, wow, this is like, but that's what they tell them, because what's done in the past hasn't worked. You go in real cautiously, and then you start hearing shots, and you got 8 or 10 bodies there, and they say, look, this is, in fact, it even says, this isn't something that you should regret. This is what you train your entire career for, and if not you, who? I mean, that's, again, it's like, put me in, coach, I want to knock some heads or something, and that's what these guys are told. You got to get in there and aggressively neutralize the threat. So again, that again is a factor, and again, I don't know, maybe that training is a little bit over the top. I don't know. I mean, it struck me as like, wow, that's like.
Yeah, but when that call comes in, you say the guy's walking around pointing and stuff.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
And one of the things, one of the slides says, if it's one of your loved ones in that store, do you want the police to wait outside and drink coffee and, you know, tell jokes until 8 or 10 other guys go, or do you want the police to go in there? And that's what they tell. So again, it's just not an easy situation. And again, these police, again, the example, if that 911 would have gone out over the Walmart thing, there would have been a stampede out of that store, and these guys are told, you got to get in there. Everybody else is running away from it. You got to go in there and confront it. So if I see a guy fitting the description with a gun, he doesn't put it down right away, you don't have to wait. In fact, their training says you don't even have to give an order to drop a gun. You don't even have to see a gun. As long as all the circumstances tell you it's a danger, you're allowed to engage. And a lot of times these guys will tuck in their shirt. Is he tucking in his shirt, or is he reaching for a gun? Again, a lot of shootings happen like that, and it turns out the guy doesn't have a gun. He might be going for his cell phone or whatever. Who knows?
Mark, what they say, once these mass shootings start, it's one every 15 seconds.
Well, in fact, they say the normal mass shooting lasts 3 to 4 minutes. Every 15 seconds, someone is killed. The normal police response is 5 minutes. So in other words, by the time you get there, it's usually over with, and there's a bunch of dead bodies. So get in there as fast as you can.
Would you say these guys did what they were trained to do as they were trained to do it?
Yes. And that's, again, I thought it was appropriate. And again, some people might criticize that, but we thought it was appropriate for the grand jury to know, how are these guys taught to deal with this situation? I mean, in fairness to them, and this is what they're taught to do. So again, if you want to criticize the training or change it, okay, but these guys just did what they were told to do. You know, the other thing, tragic too, there was a lady that died of a heart attack out of this. I mean, it was tragic for the Crawford family. It's tragic. She's in the store. She had a heart condition, I believe. She's only in her 30s. And here's the commotion. Here's the gunshot is running out of the store and passes out and dies of a heart attack. Again, they attributed it to this incident. So again, it's just a tragic thing on all levels for the Crawford family, for the police officers that had to face this threat and confront it, and for the family of Angela Williams, who just was another Walmart shopper.